Hi, my name is Haley Love. I'm a junior at Whitney M. Young Magnet High School and a poet. Today I'm going to give you some information about my creative process and some tips to help you write your next poetic masterpiece. So the first topic that I want to talk about is the fact that sometimes you have to be patient to write poems. Creative droughts happen. Times where you can't really write, or you don't enjoy the writing process, or you feel like it's forced. That happens. But there are also these really great, amazing times as a poet when you're in a creative mood and you want to write and write and write, and you end up with so many half-written poems in your phone that you can pull out at any time and finish and feel really connected to those ideas. Listen out for those times, be responsive, and write when you feel like writing. One of my favorite poems ever was written in the passenger seat of my friend's car with the music blasting so loud that I couldn't hear myself think. And it's one of my favorite poems because I didn't really think about writing it. I wrote down the ideas as they came to me, and it turned out to be something really beautiful and personal. Okay, moving right along, I have my laptop with me, so if you see me looking down, that's why, just to remind me of a few notes. But we are going to move right into the next tip, which is how to pick a topic and how not to pick a topic. This is a really, really, really important concept that I had to wait a long time to figure out for myself, so I want to just impart some knowledge on you guys. This is really important to me. Write for your mood. If you're feeling sad, and you want to write from that place, that is perfectly fine. But if you are feeling happy and you're in a really good spot in your life and you feel really great and creative at that point in time, don't feel discouraged by the fact that so many poems have very difficult stories to hear. Write from that happy place and feel just as confident in that work as you would in a work that tells a story that is relatable and powerful in a different type of way. However, if you are sad, this brings me to my next point. If you're going through a really rough time in your life, sometimes that can be difficult to write about. And I understand that. When I first started writing, a lot of my writing was about insecurities and things that were very personal to me, and it was hard to put myself into my writing, if that makes sense. One of my biggest tips for writing about difficult topics is to remove yourself from the story altogether. For me, it was a lot easier to say, she is feeling this way, or the girl who did this, rather than putting myself in the situation in my writing. Once you get more comfortable and you get more okay with people really understanding you to that depth, you'll feel more comfortable placing yourself into your writing and knowing that it can benefit other people. Which moves me to the fact that you need to sit on your poems. Let your poems breathe. Write them, go get a glass of water, take a nap, go to sleep, wake up the next day. Just let them breathe and come back to them with a fresh set of eyes. You might see stuff that you didn't see earlier, or understand things about you as a writer that you didn't know previously that can make your piece that much stronger. Also recognize that as poets, we love devices, but devices, while they are amazing, are not everything. You want to make sure that your story shines through in light of all of the alliteration and the long extended metaphors and the super great rhyming scheme that you've created. You want to make sure that it's understandable and that when people read it back, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Not just like, oh, that was a cool line. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that the entire thing is impactful, and you want to use every word as wisely as you can. That brings me to the beauty of all of your partially written poems. Sometimes these pieces are just ideas that got left behind. Sometimes you were pressed for time and you couldn't finish. Sometimes you got writer's block and you couldn't finish. So I am going to take this time to read a partial poem that I've written, and we're just gonna unpack it a little bit, talk about some really great things that are happening, talk about some things I wish I could change, and how to extend a piece like this forward now that I've completely moved on from whatever situation this poem was originally written about, and using universal themes to really speak to people. I actually prefer writing to typing, because I can press into the paper and tell you how I feel, and if I press any harder on the keys of my laptop, they'll break. And I prefer calling to texting. because trying to get you to understand me is even more difficult when my anxiety proofreads our communication and determines that what I mean isn't really what I mean. What I'm trying to say is too on edge and I'll come off as angry, or you won't see the smile behind my tears, the hope in my struggle to communicate all of my irrational fears. These are my desperate attempts to unplug and unwind and show that maybe I'm not so dependent on the yeses of the yes men, my peers. Let me make it crystal clear, I don't mind that they took away likes on Instagram. That is where I stopped. That is where I stopped originally. I really love this partial piece, and I hope to finish it one day when I feel really in tune with where I was at that time. Let's talk about a few lines. So one line about this that I love is, these are my desperate attempts to unplug and unwind and show that maybe I'm not so dependent. I remember writing this line because I wrote unplug and unwind, and I really wanted to say something about time to make it sound good. And I realized that that was just not where this piece was going, and that that's not how I was feeling at the time. And while it sounded good, it wasn't true to what I wanted to write. So I took it a completely different direction, and I said, I'm not so dependent. That was the end of that kind of alliteration or rhyme scheme. Another great part of this piece is the fact that I said, on the yeses of yes men, my peers, let me make myself crystal clear, I don't mind that they took away likes on Instagram. That is where I stopped. Now, yeses of yes men, my peers, crystal clear. Peers, clear, not perfectly rhyming, but they sound really good when you read them. I broke that up as well and put in, I don't mind that they took away likes on Instagram. I do that a lot in my pieces because it makes you pay attention to the line that stands out, the line that doesn't necessarily fit in with the rest of the rhyme scheme, and it helps people kind of draw in. They're like, whoa, that was really cool, and then you pulled me in even more when you said something really off guard. So definitely take advantage of that, and don't feel like you have to carry the same rhyme scheme all the way through or make everything a super long line of alliteration. Feel free to be creative and to carry out your story in the most authentic way possible, and break that rhyme scheme if you have to. Nobody is holding you to it. This is your piece, your creation to manipulate and work the way that you want. Another great parallel, of course, is writing to typing and calling to texting. So writing and calling are more like old ways of communicating in my mind. A lot of my friends, me included, we text each other or we type out everything. Like, I'm super speedy at typing, and it's just much easier for me to get things done that way. But sometimes when I go back and read poems that I wrote on my laptop, I don't understand the connotation as much as I do if I put it in my journal and I can see the strokes of the pen, and like, oh, I was really frustrated, versus, oh, this was a really light, airy piece that I was really excited about. So just lean into your partial poems and really understand that those are your fuel to keep going. If I were to extend this piece, I think I would actually start with another parallelism from the beginning, and explain that one a little more, and then lean into how I feel about more archaic ways of communicating and why it's helpful to me in my mental state. My next tip is all about how to edit with other people. Something that's really great about my poetry community is the fact that I'm a part of the LTAP Poetry Slam team at school, which means I have a bunch of other very amazing creative minds to bounce ideas off of. My team collaborates as a part of the LTAP Poetry Slam competition, which is an amazing opportunity for young writers to really express their ideas and get up on stage and practice talking to a lot of people at one time. And we start preparing in September to write and to perform and to get everything ready, and they are really my rock when it comes to editing and looking back at poems with a fresh set of eyes, not knowing the situation, not having a setup of anything in their minds or a preconceived notion of what the piece is supposed to be about, and really coming in and they're just like, okay, what do I see here? What do I get out of this piece? What do I feel out of this piece? And how you can make it stronger. Sometimes it is really easy for us to just kind of stretch a line to get to the next rhyme scheme or get to the next line that really hits and lands with the audience, but they keep me accountable for writing for my audience and making sure that I use every word to its fullest capacity. When you're writing for an audience, especially with LTAB, you have 3 minutes on that stage to make people feel the emotion that you're feeling and really understand you as a poet. Writing and editing with other people will allow you the opportunity to get a fresh set of eyes on your work and see if your poem reads well without you explaining any backstory. My last tip is all about memorization and delivery, which have the chance to make or break an amazing poem. Now, people ask me a lot, how do you memorize things? Especially over the summer, I had to speed memorize poems back to back to back and be ready to recite them in front of people straight through one take. My tip for memorization is to do it all the time. If you are just memorizing a piece, say you'll read lines 1 and 2 until you can say them back without your laptop, without your phone, without your journal. You can just talk to someone and say those lines, right? Then you're going to move on to 3 and 4. But instead of just memorizing 3 and 4, you're going to memorize 2, 3, and 4 together so that you link those ideas, and when you go back to it, you understand where you're moving from line 1. So if you get to line 1 and 2, you don't pause because you don't know what's coming next. With poetry, this is a little bit easier because often we have links between our lines and concepts that carry through the entire piece of work. But it's still a great tip to memorize in chunks and make sure that you're connecting things as you go along. Another great thing about memorization is that you can test it anytime. When you memorize a full piece and you've gone through this thing chunk by chunk by chunk, you've connected the whole thing, you can finally say it back to yourself or to your mom or to your dad or to your sibling, to your dog. A great thing to do is to walk away. Just leave it alone. Don't say it in your head. Let it be. 20 minutes later, after you've eaten that sandwich, after you've taken a nap, after you've gone on YouTube or binge watched Netflix, come back and see if you can say it again. Keep doing that as long as you need to be able to recite it perfectly at any given moment and come back to it. Now, on to delivery. Delivery of a piece on a stage is so different from in your bedroom when you're writing it and you're upset or you're super duper happy and in love and you're writing this great piece, and then you get on stage and you're just freezing. One of my favorite parts of writing poetry is performing and talking to people, so I have a few tips for delivery and how to be effective. When you get on stage, you're gonna be a little nervous. That's okay. Lean into that fear and really feel it out. Let it dedicate you to your character even more. If you're supposed to be a girl in love, maybe you're extra jittery. If you're supposed to be timid, maybe you're extra internalized and fearful. Lean into that fear and that emotion and allow it to propel you towards getting this poem out. Now, once you have completely memorized a piece and you can say it forwards and backwards in your sleep, delivery comes a lot easier. But if you're struggling with memorization, another thing that you can do is add movements or key moments in the poem that trigger other things, right? So in my LTAB individual piece this year, there was one move that I did at the same line every time I read the piece, and it propelled me to the next part because I had trouble remembering it, and that move got me through it. Another great thing about performance is that you have the opportunity to impart on your audience whatever you were feeling when you wrote this piece. Make sure you do that. Dedicate yourself to your character and how you were feeling when you wrote it, and impose that on the audience. Make them feel upset. Make them feel frustrated. Make them understand your cause that much more. That is why you got on this stage, and that is what you need to leave having done. Another amazing tip about delivery is to enunciate. Make sure you're articulating your words as much as humanly possible, because someone in the front row may be able to hear you, but someone in the back row may not be able to understand, and you want to make sure that you're talking for the person in the back row. And when you speed up and you get to a cadence that's moving a little quicker, people in the back can still understand you when you're enunciating and you're articulating your words as much as you possibly can. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that these tips were helpful for either writing or performing your piece for the SocialWorks Digital Open Mic. Bye!